Source familiar with the meeting confirms to me the Associated Press is reporting that General Motors CEO Mary Barra is going to meet with Larry Kudlow, the National Economic Council director, here at the White House today in regard to GM's announcement about those layoffs and plant rearrangements. No information on exactly what the two are going to talk about here, but you remember that Mary Barra was a very visible presence at the Trump White House early on in the Trump administration, serving on his CEO Business Council and attending a number of meetings here. That's been less in evidence as it has been for many CEOs who participated early in this administration, but we are told now from a source familiar with the meeting that will take place, the Mary Barra meeting with Larry Kudlow this afternoon. No word on whether she'll meet with the president himself, who is set to leave the White House in about an hour's time or less, on his way to an event in Mississippi this evening. So we'll see whether that meeting with Mary Barra takes place or if it's just Larry Kudlow that meets with her here at the White House. Tyler?
You know, we are just talking about this conversation, what a conversation might be like between Kudlow and Barra with Jimmy Pethokoukis and Jared Bernstein. They're saying, you know, this has really been a push-pull with this administration. We've given you a bailout, or the U.S. government has given you a bailout. We've given you tax cuts, and here you are giving us job cuts. At the same time, the administration has also dealt tariffs, which has cost GM $1 billion, and uncertainty surrounding NAFTA. I mean, as you sort of plot out the leverage that the administration might have over GM and vice versa, Eamon, what do you see?
Well, so game it out, right? I mean, imagine what Larry Kudlow might be able to say to Mary Barra. This administration doesn't want to see layoffs on the president's watch. On the other hand, they don't have a lot to offer incentive-wise. So the question is, do they have anything to offer in terms of potential punishments, right? And usually, you know, administrations have all sorts of things to deal in terms of dealing with businesses. But I think in this case, you might argue that sort of the bully pulpit here is what the administration has to offer. That is that the president has expressed, you know, sort of deep anger at companies that haven't done what he wanted. The Harley-Davidson example comes to mind, and there's some question about whether that's impacted Harley-Davidson or not. But imagine President Trump his criticism of GM unleashed in the wake of this, and that could be a business headache for General Motors. No indication that that's potentially happening here. It might be just that what Larry Kudlow wants from this meeting is a sense of how big this is, why it's happening, and what's likely to happen next. So it could just be this is Larry Kudlow gathering as much economic information as he can.
Well, the Twitter account is silent for now, Eamon.
That's right.
Thank you. Eamon Javers joining us from the White House. Joining us now for more on the story is Paul Ingrassia, the editor at the Revs Institute for Automotive Research. Paul, great to have you with us. So this is taking an interesting turn with Mary Barra going to the White House or meeting with Larry Kudlow, the NEC director. What do you think the tone of the conversation will be, in your view? Could GM be bullied in any sense?
Well, it'll not be a pleasant conversation, I don't think. But I think you have to step back and look at this. Obviously, it's a big deal, both financially, Melissa, and politically. Financially, you know, this GM management team has shown itself to be quite adept at tackling problems before they become crises. So let's look at some examples. They got out of Russia some years ago before the Russian economy really got a lot worse. And also, they sold Opel in Europe. Now, that should have happened about 15 years ago, but the previous management was not willing to step up and do that. So this management team has done those things. The pain here is not falling only on blue-collar workers, by the way, but because GM, don't forget, has announced it's going to cut its executive ranks by 25% and its overall white-collar ranks by about 15%. So obviously GM sees a slowdown in global automotive demand, or at least in America and perhaps China coming. On the political front, everyone's talking about, you know, hey, the tariffs that Trump put on to help the steel industry have had a negative impact on General Motors and its cost base, you know, here in the United States. So that's something that the administration, you know, may fume about, but it's going to be hard to deny that.
What kind of leverage does, to use Melissa's word a few minutes ago, does the administration have to get something out of GM with what appears to be a decision that's being made for economic reasons because demand is slowing, and particularly product mix, a demand for the kinds of products that are now being sort of shunted aside, like sedans, the Cruze, the Impala, nice cars, but they're just not selling.
Well, exactly, Tyler. I don't think the administration has that much leverage, to be honest with you. except for the bully pulpit. And, has that really worked with Harley Davidson? I don't think so. The Harley Davidson plans are intact. So it seems to me that, GM has made its case here. It would be very difficult for them to make a truly about-face turn. They might be able to soften things around the edges if the pressure from the administration gets, verbal pressure gets pretty heated, but there's not too much they can do, I don't think.
When you take a look at the story, maybe from farther away, Paul, do you see this story as a story of the slowdown in the global auto industry, or more of just the lack of demand for cars?
Well, it's a little bit of both, Melissa, honestly. I mean, the auto industry has had an incredible run in the United States since the bailout. I mean, they were selling, in 2009, I think automobiles were about 10.5 million cars and trucks sold in America. Lately, it's been 17 million a year, more or less, thereabouts. So it's a cyclical business, so this is really kind of overdue in a way. But also, there's a huge structural change in the move from sedans to SUVs and crossovers and trucks. And on top of that, layer on top of that, the three simultaneous revolutions that are going on in this industry. The propulsion revolution, the move from internal combustions to electrics and hybrids, the autonomy revolution to driverless cars, and the community revolution, which means, Uber and Lyft and the rest of them that will be joined with driverless cars. So there's an awful lot in play here that the senior management of GM has to really be looking 3 to 5 years out, which seems to be what they're doing.
All right, Paul, thank you very much for your analysis.